The average gas price per gallon in the U.S. has now topped $4 for the first time in more than a decade.
Experts say prices will continue to rise, not just for gas, but other goods as well. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans has more from Los Angeles.
Drivers spent the weekend in long lines for cheaper gas in Southern California, where prices average more than $5 a gallon.
I had to get here early for gas because it's this crazy out there. It's over $6.
Nationally, gas prices are skyrocketing, averaging more than $4 a gallon. A typical driver is paying $16 more to fill up than this time last year. Russia's invasion of Ukraine putting pressure on global oil markets is partly to blame.
When could we see gas prices actually start to decline?
Realistically, it's going to be rough for the next 6 months.
UCLA senior economist Leo Feller says the war in Ukraine is impacting its exports and Russia's.
We're seeing big supply shocks, right? We're seeing oil prices go up. We're seeing wheat prices go up. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, right? So there is a lot of concern that this is going to make an inflationary problem even worse.
Russia and Ukraine supplied nearly a third of the world's wheat last year, and since the invasion, exports have come to a standstill, meaning shoppers could see a rise in prices for items like cereal and bread and even meat, since some farmers rely on wheat to feed livestock.
How long is this going to last?
It's going to last as long as a war between Russia and Ukraine lasts, and until we're able to ramp up production in the U.S. The demand is there.
By the end of the week, we could see the national average for a gallon of gas shatter the all-time record high of $4.11 a gallon. But with oil prices close to $100 a barrel, U.S. producers will start ramping up production soon. It usually takes, though, about 6 months to get that oil into the pipeline. Carter Evans, CBS News, Los Angeles.
For more on this pain at the pump that everyone is feeling, let's bring in Mike Sommers. He is the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. Mike, thank you so much for being with us. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. is now considering banning Russian oil imports. Do you expect that the White House will ultimately take this step? And why do you think they haven't done it already?
Well, I think you have to remember that most oil refiners here in the United States have already cut off the amount of oil that we're getting from Russia. In fact, we're barely getting any Russian crude oil right now. The most important thing that we can do right now is really focus on increasing supply here in the United States. And that means adopting a regulatory framework that advances American energy leadership.
And Mike, what exactly would that look like? I mean, how could the U.S. make up a loss of Russian oil domestically? Carter Evans touched on this in his piece, but how quickly could that be done?
Well, we have to remember at the beginning of the Biden administration, they did a couple of big things that really dampened the amount of oil and gas that we were producing in the United States. First, they cut off the Keystone XL pipeline. Then they put a moratorium on leasing and permitting on federal lands and on offshore waters. And then they cut off supply from the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. So really the first week of this Biden administration was very harmful to the domestic production of oil and natural gas. So right now, that moratorium continues on federal lands and in federal waters. They've slowed down infrastructure development as well. So we need a regulatory framework that advances American energy leadership right now, particularly as hostilities continue in the country of Ukraine.
Mike, I hear what you're saying, but as you know better than anyone, the vast majority of drilling takes place not on federal lands, but on privately owned lands. And the Keystone XL pipeline doesn't involve drilling here in the U.S. It's simply transporting energy that's been drilled for in Canada. So what can be really done at this point? The White House keeps saying, look, domestic oil companies could produce more if they wanted to, because there are 9,000 permits here in the U.S. that are going unused right now. Are they right about that?
Well, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding as to what that means when you have a lease. In fact, right now, we have the highest percentage of leases that are being operated right now in 2 decades. The Permian Basin, the most prolific basin here in the United States, actually reached record levels of production at 5 million barrels a day. Rig counts continue to go up in the United States. American producers are responding. But at the same time, we have an administration that does seem to be focused more on developing oil and gas overseas than it does here in the United States. So they're trying to cut a deal with Venezuela. They're working to get Iran back into the nuclear deal. And even there's a suggestion for them to go visit Saudi Arabia here this spring. We would like those same kind of meetings with American producers who want to develop more here in the United States as quickly as possible. But what it really requires is a federal policy that, again, advances American energy leadership.
So, Mike, if the U.S. went ahead and banned imports of Russian oil, how significantly might that impact Russia? And who do you think might actually buy Russia's oil instead?
Well, we do have to remember that these are global commodities markets. So you should expect that if that oil is not coming to the United States, and it's not right now, in fact, most U.S. refiners have cut back almost completely what is coming into the United States. That oil probably will go elsewhere. It will probably go to other overseas markets, to China or other Asian markets in particular. So the United States refiners right now are already saying that they're not going to tolerate what is going on in Ukraine. And that we don't want that Russian crude entering into the American market. But what we really should be focused on is how do we replace that Russian crude with American crude, with the United States producers stepping up to the plate and doing what we need to do to advance American energy leadership during this time of international turmoil.
Okay, so what can U.S. refiners do and how quickly can they do it? We know those permits exist. How much could they ramp up production by, and how quickly could they do it?
Well, that's, again, what we need to focus on, which is trying to get more of that American supply on market as quickly as possible. But this is going to take a world approach. We're going to have to work with our trading partners to ensure that we have the supply that we need as American production ramps up. That's one of the reasons why that Keystone decision was so very detrimental to this, because as a consequence of cutting off that Keystone pipeline, we're not getting that amount of crude from Canada that we would have gotten otherwise. It's coming to the market, but not in an efficient way. It's on rail or it's on truck. We need to get these pipelines permitted so that we can get the supply to where it needs to be now for American consumers.
As Nancy said, so much pain at the pump that Americans are feeling right now. Mike Sommers. Mike, thank you very much.
Great to be with you.